Hey everyone, welcome to the Midpoint Review. I'm your host, AJ Tabando, and we've got a great show for you today. I'm joined by my friend, Shannon Lee Simmons, a financial advisor, author, speaker, and all around amazing person. I am so excited for you guys because I know you're going to love this episode. We talk about all of it, how the playbook of life has changed and how that's impacted the way we think about money, how our expectations are changing around retirement, home ownership, and hustle, and how that's changing our relationship to work. We talk about how millennials trust or don't financial institutions and draw a line back to the financial crisis happening when we were all starting to make money and the trauma scars we carry as a result of that. We talk about value in life, that finances are valuable, but so is time, and how to spend your time is just as important as how you spend your money. And Shannon gives us some stories about the situation she's seen as a financial advisor that have given her hope that no matter how hard things get, with time, everything can be navigated. It's just so good. I'm so excited for you guys right now. But before we get started, shout out to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. Habit is a classic, smooth, full body diner roast, and it tastes like the platonic ideal of coffee. That's right, platonic ideal. Look it up, guys. It tastes like what you think coffee is supposed to taste like. Just close your eyes, imagine what coffee tastes like. Boom, there you go. Now, all you need to do is order it, have a bag shipped to your door, and watch your whole life change. So go to www.habitcoffeeclub.com and order a bag or sign up for a subscription and use the promo code midpoint at checkout for 20% off. That's www.habitcoffeeclub.com. All right, let's start the show. All right, welcome everyone to the Midpoint Review. I'm super excited for today's guest, Shannon Lee Simmons. If you've ever hit that point in your life where you're Googling, how do I manage my money like a grown-up? You've probably come across some of Shannon's work. She is an award-winning certified financial planner, speaker, best-selling author of 4 books, chartered investment manager, and founder of the New School of Finance. She is a personal finance writer for the Globe and Mail, as well as CBC Radio's Metro Morning Money columnist. And she recently published her 4th book, Making Bank, Money Skills for Real Life, to help young people and teenagers learn all about money management. If it's not already clear, she is an absolute powerhouse and an awesome person. And so I'm so excited to have her as a guest on the show with us here today. So Shannon, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. So you are busy. You have done all the things, and full disclosure, I can totally attest for Shannon's quality of work because before you and I knew each other, I was a client of the New School of Finance. At the first time I had my, oh shit, how do I manage money moment in life? So, and you know, the folks I talked to there made it feel so easy. So tell, for the listeners who might not be familiar with you and didn't kind of hear enough from all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this work.
Yeah, I mean, I love people. So it's funny. A lot of people think that I'm dealing with money, but it's personal finance. And I'm like, the personal part of it is what keeps it exciting and not boring for me. Think about it. Every day for the last 20 years, I get on a call or a meeting with someone and it's like, tell me your hopes and dreams and fears. Like immediately I'm like, I'm in the know. So that to me is like, it keeps it curious and fascinating, and I think people are just trying to like navigate it. And so I got into it because I was good at math, and then I really like people, and so that was sort of like the natural stream. And I quit I started on Bay Street, like a big fancy job for those first years out of university. And everyone wants me to hate it. Everyone wants me to hate it. It was so cushy and so sweet. They brought in fruit every other day, fresh fruit, and you just like arrive on your desk. And we were dealing with high net worth clients, people who had to have like millions of dollars liquid, not in a house, like liquid in an investment account to invest there. And so at that level of wealth, you also get like transparent fees and you get good service. So it really was very sweet. But we did get bought out by a bank, which I didn't love. And then during the 2008-2009 crisis, I was like, where are normal people going for financial advice? Because these millionaires are freaking out. So what about like everyday people? And there was hardly anything available for like people who didn't have, like who don't reach those minimums. So that's when I quit and started New School of Finance and never looked back. So that was like, New School of Finance has been around for like 15 years. Isn't that wild?
That is wild. It's wild to be at a point in our life where we can say we've been doing anything for more than a decade. Like I was talking to a friend the other day and I was like, I've known you for 20 years and yet I'm only 21. How is this possible? The math doesn't
How does
math.
that math work?
That's incredible. And I love the idea of getting into it because of the people and the personal finance. And I think that that is, is that something that you find when you talk to people? I feel like a lot of people come to you or read your books who perhaps have been scared of finance or have been scared of money
Yeah.
or intimidated in the past. Is that something that you find and that you
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
connect with?
Yeah, I think the reason we're so busy is because there's not a lot of the industry is like built to sell products and it's trying to shift and stuff like that, but what I do is fee only financial planning. So we don't sell any products. We
Mm,
don't like sell mutual funds or whatever. So I think that there's an immediate trust that's built with people. And that's also what really helps, because sometimes there's jargon, like when people go into the industry, there's also, if you're being sold a product, there's a skepticism, I think, with our generation, whereas like maybe the generations before didn't have that same skeptical eye, but now there was so much that came out in like the early millenniums, like early millennium, like the new fees were out and fees were added, all these things happening. There's this mistrust of like, oh, what are you trying to get from me? Like, should I trust you? And so I think
mm.
that that's really unique to our generation as well. Is that was I think we were the first ones that started like using robo advisors and DIY stuff and asking those questions like, can I trust this person? So I don't know. I just feel like I still have so many people that come and there's still that gap where it's like, I feel like that person didn't talk to me in a way that made me feel like I understood anything. I'm
Mhm.
worried that they're trying to sell me something. Are they? And it's like, yeah, they
Yeah.
might be, but it might not be a bad thing. Like everyone, like that might still be okay. But I just
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of mistrust. Part of why I think we do well, or we have that like a big lineup to get in, is that we are just because we don't sell product, it's just because we're fee only. There's an immediate trust that's built in there. And then I think because of I do media stuff and I'm in books and stuff, people get a flavor for my personality. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, she's not going to talk down to me and patronize me. Like that's, thank God.
Yeah, it's so real. I want to touch on one of the things that you said around the financial crisis and see like what are the ties there, because our generation has grown up through multiple crises, right? And I think of like 9/11 happened when I was just hitting adulthood, and that kind of like was the first thing that kind of shaped me in a lot of ways, of watching things I trusted, either fall apart or not live up to my expectations. And then we're all just kind of mentally and emotionally recovering from some of those disappointments. And then the financial collapse hits. And, all these things that we were told to be true suddenly were not true. And all these institutions that, were telling us they were doing things one way turned out to be doing things another way. And it had massive consequences for for so many of us, and for particularly this generation. I think we're both on sort of the elder side of millennial, but
Yes.
for folks a couple years younger than us, this was right when they were hitting the job market, right when they were entering the workforce and starting to make money and saying, what do I do with this money? Do I go back to these places that seem to have just completely and irresponsibly mismanaged money? And so, yeah, you sort of say like how do you see that evolving or emerging in your work? Do you think kind of part of our generation's challenge is we carry some of those scars from watching that happen?
Yeah, big time. I mean, I was making a comment about this the other day during the tariff sell off that happened just recently. I'm like, well, this is so just as an adult alone working before, I worked in finances during that crisis. I worked during, like pandemic sell offs during this tariff stuff. Like it happens, right? And
Right.
so I think that the Great Recession, so the 2008, 2009 crash, was a marked thing for our entire generation. I think we've all felt the ripple effects of that, even the ones who are on the younger millennial side of things to the older. I think that number one, the trust of institutions changed. Number two, the dream of, I think we were the first generation that had to wake up and smell the coffee, right? So it's like, we're not going to have that. So the baby boomers like set this tone, and they're mostly our parents. The millennial parent is the baby boomer most of the time. And it's like, wait a second, homeownership probably isn't a thing for us, maybe for some, but not all.
Mm-hmm.
There's not the same job market. Wait, robots might take over my job one day. Wait, climate change might be real. Like all of those sort of things that Gen Z is now dealing with in real time. We were sort of I think we were the gateway generation to it. And I think we were the first ones that had a whiplash moment of like, wait, what? Whereas Gen Z's known for a long time. They're coming into adulthood already knowing this.
Yeah.
We did not. We thought everything was peachy keen on the whole. And we're also adult internet people. So we had analog childhoods. and
Hmm.
young adulthood. And then we went through adulthood, we became adults when social media sort of took off. So I'm grateful for that. But I also think that that has really changed the way we spend money. I think that's changed the way that we think about, that we interact with, like I see it on the financial side of things, big time, on how we, our shared experiences, like all of it. I just think our millennials are so interesting that way. We had such like a two-sided thing in our life, from being like analog people to digital people,
Yeah.
and in such prime years of our life, like, you know what I mean? I can like
Yeah.
pinpoint when it all happened. I remember getting Facebook, like it was a wild thing. I remember standing in line at a Tim Hortons being like, oh my God, I saw where that person was last night. Like I remember that when it was like I was 22, when
Yeah.
Facebook came on the scene for me. So I don't know. I just think we're so interesting. And I think we've really been shaped by technology and also these recessions. And I think that sort of shifted how we get information. So I
Yeah.
think we started to trust the internet first. We started to go to the internet first. So we started to do that versus going to people and institutions. And I just like, I really think that we've been shaped by so much of those crises.
Yes, yes, yes to all of it. I remember vividly like starting high school with no internet and then getting
Yes.
like ICQ in grade
Right.
10 and then
Right. Yeah.
like remember that? And
Mhm.
that was like talking to people outside of school, and then by the end of it, like that was just like Messenger existed, MySpace existed, and that was just we were off. And then university, yeah,
Yeah.
we got Facebook halfway through, and it was, but you can remember it was totally in those very formative, like literally, young person to adult transition period where we also transitioned from analog to digital.
Yes.
And that was the same moment in time for us, and I think there's so much there to unpack. So we were the first generation to wake up and smell the coffee, and I think that whiplash moment that you talk about of realizing like, oh shit, all this stuff that we were told our future was going to look like, it's not actually going to look like that. And I think, we had this moment, the recession was really that wake up call moment where, the personal impact of change became very real.
Hmm.
And then I think for the next like decade or so, it was a lot of, for me, it was a lot of like seeing if I could still hold on. Like, okay, I know that things are changing, but can I still get that house? Can I still
Yeah.
build that career? Can I still start that family? Whatever it is. And now we're kind of at that midpoint of like, some of us hit some of those milestones, some of us didn't, some of us found new milestones. But it strikes me that this may be sort of like another oh shit moment in a way of being like, okay, like now I'm at this point. All the things that I thought the back half of my life were going to look like may have changed one way or another. Now, what do I do?
Yeah, I agree. I think we have two whiplash moments. So there's still many millennials, myself included in that. And again, I think the elder millennial experience is different than the
Yeah.
ones that sort of snuck in there at the very end. I have a sister-in-law who is 10 years younger, so she's still
Mhm.
technically a millennial, and our lives are very different. Like
Yeah.
I feel like the elder millennials might have been like the last cohort where home ownership was like hard, but you could still
Hard but
reach for
possible.
it if you
Yes.
needed to, like that. And
Yeah.
now it's so much harder, even 5 years, and like rents are wild. But I
Hmm.
do think that there's this, okay, I'm 40, doing this for almost 20 years, and I got another 20 years to go. And I'm
Hmm.
like, it's not going to look like I hit the milestones that I thought were going to normalize things, and they still don't. Those
Yeah.
milestones are still not normalizing what I thought was supposed to be normal, right? So there's still that
Hmm.
adjustment period. And I think this is generational as well. And I think Gen X, even my clients who are in Gen X are feeling this too, is that in the same way that the promise of home ownership was supposed to be attainable, the promise of slowing down was supposed to be attainable and is no longer economically feasible for most people to do that. And it's becoming more apparent. And I don't mean that as a doom and gloom. I just mean it as like in the same way that like homeownership became a thing that was like, whoa, 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 maybe we were all unrealistic about our expectations. Wait a second, where do we get off? Everyone thinks that they should own their own white picket fence in a house. Like, what? Let's dig into those assumptions for a second. And I find myself comforting my own self about this when I have those like harumph moments where I'm like, I'm never going to be able to stop working. I'm like, wait a second. I run financial plans and retirement plans every day, every
Yeah.
single day. And think about what I'm doing. I'm literally saying, if you live from 65 to 95, that's just standard kind of thing. Here's what you like, how much can you spend? So I'm basically saying, can you live a normal life for 30 years without working? That's what I'm saying. What a wild expectation. When you think about it like
Mm,
that, it's like 30 years I would like to live a normal life, which means spend what I want to spend
yeah.
and not work. So when I think of it like that, I feel a lot more calm. I'm like, okay, that's an expectation that maybe the expectation was wrong and the
Mm,
circumstances are normal instead of the other way around, you know?
mhm.
I baffle and I with that myself because I feel it keenly on the side of someone who doesn't want to can't imagine like I'm already so tired and I got to grind it out for so much longer.
Yeah.
And like I think our generation too was the last like grind it out generation. Like we really had that instilled in us.
Yeah.
And I find that younger generations that I'm working with, they see the holes in that plan already. Like they already want to have work-life balance in their 20s. And like we had that baby boomer work ethic. Like you work
Yeah.
hard and you get what you need. Like, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think your point around expectations too, like that's definitely something to think about because there's a part of me that's like, yeah, maybe some of these expectations are unrealistic, but then it's also like, well, but no, because there were generations before us who lived those lives, right? For whom to some degree, I mean, they maybe didn't live quite as long,
It didn't
but
live as long.
I
Yeah.
think but I think yeah, and there is something to be said for that. But it's interesting to kind of compare those two things that you just said, sort of that perhaps it's not realistic to expect to not be able to work for 30 years after you retire. But then, to some degree, part of the promise of work is like at some point I don't need to do this anymore. And so I work really hard up front and I have that boomer work ethic and grind it out for a company that will continue to pay me and employ me and do all these things, and then eventually I will make enough that I can stop doing this. And like all of those assumptions are fraying, right? So the assumption of retirement is fraying, as you just described. The assumption that my willingness to work hard for a company will be directly tied to my job security
Yeah.
really doesn't exist. I know good people who care a lot about their companies who have been laid off 4 times in the
Same.
last 6 years.
Yep.
Like there is no tie. I mean, and I'm just like, if you phone it in, you might get fired. I'm not saying that there's no tie there, but you also might hustle your face off.
And still get paid
And
enough.
there's a corporate decision way above you that, you know what, we got to hit our profit targets this quarter and we're going to lay off 10% of the workforce to do it. And your effort is irrelevant to that decision, right?
Yeah.
And so and that is now happening at scale that is, pretty unprecedented. And I think probably could be tied back in many ways to a lot of what happened during the financial crisis and the rewiring of sort of labor and work during that period. And so it's like all these things that we were sort of taught about the relationship we're supposed to have with work are fraying. And so, yeah, like if I was Gen Z coming up being like, well, it doesn't matter how much I work, my employer doesn't give a shit. And no matter how hard I work and how much money I make, I'm never going to be able to afford all the things that I'm supposed to be able to afford because those costs just keep exponentially
Yeah.
growing and I'll never retire. So like, yeah,
Well,
I'm going to take it easy now
yep.
because how I am today is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And I can't count on any of this stuff except for myself, you know?
I think you're nailing it. And I think that's the big generational divide between the millennial and Gen like Z is that I think the millennials are still clutching to the like adage that like if you just but what if I just and
Yeah.
especially those who were able to hit some of those milestones, there's like there might be a false sense of like, well, maybe I could still do it. Like, and
Yeah.
I think, and that's not to say that I'm hopeless in any way. I just think like, here's what I think is the new trend that I think could happen for us millennials that I think is not even not positive, just different. Just like home ownership changed for a lot of us. And it doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different than what we were expecting, right? And different doesn't mean bad. So I have a lot of millennials who like, own a shared house with another family in a duplex. And like that's different than what they thought, but like that still is cool. And like other ones have their family that moved in to the basement apartment and they have intergenerational living. And like that's different, but not bad. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think for this idea of retirement and like where we're going in the next 25 years, like what am I working towards? I have this conversation with my husband a lot and obviously with clients, but like when I get my own philosophical self, I'm like, what is the goal? Like, what am I doing? Where am I going?
What is the point of all of this?
What's the point? Like,
Yeah.
I know, I feel like I should be in France with a cigarette. Like, what's the point? Like, you know what I mean? I just like, what's the point?
That's the point. Getting
And
to
yeah,
France so
right,
you can
exactly,
just do
getting
whatever you
there. And
want.
that's exactly right. I'm like, the point is that I want to enjoy. I think I have my eyes wide open. I want to start enjoying my life. I want a little bit of Gen Z vibe, and I want to start enjoying my life now. I think that grind it out and then you'll be fine. I don't believe it anymore either. It's just too expensive. So if I know I'm going to be working well past 65, then maybe I can do this longer period of semi-retirement. Like I slow down
Yeah.
from like, 50 all the way through to 70, 75, but I'm doing something I like and I'm doing something that feels good and it's giving me a purpose, and it's just not giving me that like hence income that needs to happen. Do all the things now. You know what I mean? And so maybe that's the goal. So that's what I'm sort of working towards, is to like try to get myself to a position of when my kids are grown and hopefully, well, I don't know if they'll ever move out, who knows? And I say that lovingly, like it's just such a wild world out there. But like, adult children anyways, from that point of view. And then it's like, okay, well then what? Well, maybe I can just slow down and I'm not going to stop, but maybe it's just like it's like a different gear.
Yeah.
And so the promise of shifting gears is exciting to me in the same way that stopping is also exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could coast through and well beyond the finish line, the original finish line, if I'm more of like if I treat it like a marathon versus a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
And like that to me feels cozy still. Like I don't want to be 85 and grinding it out. That's not what I'm talking about. But like,
Yeah.
is that possible? And this is a very like first world problems conversation we're having in this point.
Totally.
But I guess I'm curious for myself to see if like one day, even though I might never actually quote retire, but maybe there's a possibility to start enjoying life now instead of grinding it out like I've been for 20 years without being able to breathe. That's more like what I'm curious about for myself. And that feels very exciting. So like maybe it's a switch of gears that is necessary for a longer period of time, but it's much more sustainable.
Yeah. I think, I am having lots of these conversations, right, these days through this podcast. And there is that question that I think is a very midlife question for everyone, but takes on a certain kind of like weight and agency for us going through this period of time of that, just like, what is the point? And not in a negative, nihilistic way, but just like getting back to first principles. Like, what is the point of all of this? Like, what is the point of working? What is the point of caring? I don't, just like all of it. What am I doing here? And what do I want this to look like? Because if that old playbook doesn't exist anymore, there's scariness that comes with that. There's a little bit of denial for us elders who got a taste of the playbook. And there's certainly some resentment because things didn't have to end up like this, but nevertheless, we're here and things have changed. And it does create this liberating opportunity to really ask yourself, like, what do I care about? What do I want my life to look like? Because I don't have to follow a path that's predestined. I can decide, and getting really clear about what matters, and then being really intentional about structuring your life in a way that can get you there. And it is it's absolutely a privileged conversation to be able to have. But at the same time, I think you can be in any economic position it's important for anyone to be really asking themselves that, because regardless of how much you have to work and how much space that takes up in your life, your mindset in how you approach that work has a huge impact on how you approach everything else in your life. Right. Yeah. And I think, it is interesting, again, like, the idea that it's unrealistic to ever stop retiring, it wasn't before, it may be now, but it is worth asking, like, is that kind of work cliff the healthiest thing to have? Right. Like I think about lots of people who work is a really meaningful part of their identity. They got a lot of sense of purpose and value out of it. And then it's like, we're retiring, and then they stop, and you have this like real identity crisis and this real sense of loss and mourning and confusion and like this sense, am I valuable anymore? And part of it is because they've just completely removed this piece of them that they got so much joy out of. But the other part, it seems to me, is that at no point in their life had they stopped working to step away and say, how do I define myself outside of work? So it's like, they don't know they don't know who they are without work. And part of it is because it stops, and part of it is because it never stopped, right? And
Yeah.
so, the idea of like downshifting gears earlier and then potentially working longer, and ideally in a way that you find that you can do the things you find joy in. It seems like maybe that is the healthier way to go about having this relationship with work.
Yeah, and I agree. And I see that with my retired clients often. You go from a life of accumulating and saving, and then now you're supposed to take it out, and it's terrifying. And now it's like, what am I doing? I think that it might be. I mean, maybe it's like the way that it should be is that we just always we work in just in different phases, and like life is more like you can shift gears or switch directions, and that's okay. It's not like you're just on the Autobahn full tilt and then
Right.
off all of a sudden, right? And you can like
Yeah.
take the scenic route. I think what makes it feel so scary to do that, because I think I subscribe to everything that we're talking about, is just the cost of living is so damn high. So
Yeah.
how can I take the scenic route if I'm supposed to pay for all these things, even in the and as the middle class gets squeezed tighter and tighter and tighter? Like, is that only for like the 1% that is able to have the like that kind of a conversation? And so I think it's what I've been really motivated by and seeing in my day-to-day life with how clients are doing it and stuff like that is the people that have like unsubscribed, I think, from the life playbook, or
Hmm.
like just don't cost as much every single month. Like they don't have a like oppressive mortgage, or they haven't like had that lifestyle inflation to the point of like, oh my, like I always think biggest gift we can all give ourselves is to not like ratchet up our day to day. If we within the choice matrix that we have, don't ratchet up your lifestyle so that you need to be earning peak dollars for the next 25 years. Like
Right.
that is where it gets into this no choice operation
Yeah.
where everything is stressful, right? And so I'm like, I've been looking at my own life, and my clients have been looking at their life being like, where can I like reduce, but not in a way that's like slash expenses, blah blah. Like how can I shift how can I like pivot things so so I cost less money every month? Or what can I do while I am burning the tank at both ends, like, or the candle at both ends, to like get myself to a position where I can breathe a little bit and I don't have to earn at this level in order to like sustain my life. Like I think that's like the next sort of goal post is like, how do I utilize my money right now while I am earning, and like burning it to get to a place where I don't have to, and like can that come earlier? But it's not that I'm done. I just don't have to do it as hard, because
Yeah.
because I think if we all sat back and said, what is the point? I can tell you my own life. I have already, this is coming from a financial planner too. We made the decision a few years ago during COVID. My husband and I, we were like, we will save less money for retirement in order to go travel in the
Yeah.
short run, because I don't know if that's even going to be on the table in like 20 years. I don't know with climate change. I don't know financially. I don't know what the world is going to look like at that point.
Mm.
I want to do that, and I will prioritize it. And like, I think I might not have had that mindset even 10 years ago. I would have
Right.
been like, we'll travel later. Like, we'll do it later. Like, save it up, save it up. And now I'm just like, I've seen too many things, AJ. I've seen
Yeah.
people save their whole, like, looking at people's finances, save their whole life and then like die, or like get a critical illness where they can't travel anymore. And I'm like, it's like the song Ironic, from Alanis Morissette, like they waited their whole damn life to take the flight kind of thing. And it's like, oh my God, I don't want to be that person. So my job has made me a lot more relaxed about stuff than everyone thinks. Everyone assumes it would make me more intense about everything. And I'm like, live your life and enjoy.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying spend everything and save nothing. I'm just saying like live your life. Live your life, because life is a weird way of throwing things at us.
So true. So true. And so like really refreshingly powerful to hear from a financial advisor. Like that, just the permission to be like, go spend your money now, and like don't be reckless, but also, not doing things because you think you have time in the future. There's a recklessness to that too, as you sort of said, right? Like you're making these assumptions. Like if you're talking about managing the value in your life, time is valuable also, right?
Yep.
And how you're managing your time is just as important as how you're managing your money. And I think that's a really Powerful thing to say. I want to come back, to your point around managing expenses and keeping those expenses low, because I think that that is something that, a lot of the folks that I talk to who are at this stage of life, there's a couple different things. There's thinking about the future, and there's thinking about retirement, and there's thinking about how I have my relationship to work, just in terms of how I want to work. There's also, a real strain, and maybe this is just all the activist folks that are in my orbits, but there's a real strain of also just being really frustrated with, the work environments that they're in, the leadership decisions that they're seeing being made, the way things are going, and a real desire, I think, to operate with a level of integrity and courage that perhaps they don't see in some of the executives older and above them. And if there's one thing, when I talk to people, who come to me and sort of lament their situations or describe their desires to be different in their workplace, it's that fear of losing their job. Like, that's the number one thing that, keeps someone silent in a boardroom when, they really feel moved to speak up and value aligned to speak up, but they don't, because at the end of the day, it's this fear of job loss, which is so real. And especially in this labor market, there's no assurances in anything. And so, it's kind of a shifting gears, but like, how, what is the advice to folks like that, to like, it's like, how do you financially plan to live the life and the retirement and the future that you want? But also, how do you financially plan to be able to live your values in a way that you want?
It's hard to do. So yeah, I would say I'm going to give you the textbook answer, because
Sure.
I think that doing this in real life is difficult. So I'll give you the like North Star to aim for. How about that?
Sure.
I would say there's two elements to living your values, or giving yourself the flexibility to do so. Because if we extrapolate that into financial terms, what we're saying is that you are not in hot water if you lose your job. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could say something, and then if you lost your job or something happened, you would be okay. So I think that it comes to two things. So number one, keeping the general overhead of your life low. This is hard if you have kids, for sure, but it is not impossible. But that would be things like, if you had a mortgage, and prioritizing paying that, like, you know what I mean? The lower that is, the lower your bills are every month. Making sure that if you rent, that you're renting in a spot that is like affordable given the relative income that you have. What I often will tell people is like, when we're planning this kind of thing, is what is an income that you think you could replace at any time? So what's an income that you're like, you know what, I might not be able to replace this income, but I think, after 6 months of a job search, I could probably land this income. Cool. Let's build your life, your bills, not your discretionary and your travel.
Yeah,
Let's build your bills around that. I could probably replace that with not a lot of stress income, or let's work toward doing that. So that if you ever actually reach it, because maybe it may not be mortgage free, but maybe it's like your mortgage is $200,000 less than it would, whatever. I'm just making things up. But
yeah.
what's that goal to give you the freedom that you're like, you could probably replace it? So I always think of that probably replace income as a really good goal to set. And then you can then you either save or spend around that while you make hay while the sun is shining, right? Like, that's the goal there. So that's the first part. And then the second part is to have like a stacked emergency account. Like, straight up. I had been touting the like benefits of an emergency account for years. They're so unsexy. They're like so boring. They like don't do anything. They're not invested. They shouldn't be. And they like earn like no percentage interest. And everyone's all pissed off. Like, why is my money sitting on the sidelines? And I'm like, because if you are anxious at 3 a.m, you can open it up on your phone and be like, if I lost my job tomorrow, I'd be fine for 4 months.
Right.
I'd be fine for 3 months. And so that kind of emergency account can really help, but getting there is so difficult. Think about how many people have enough money that they could actually get to like 3 months worth of expenditures. Like, probably not many.
Yeah.
So I often will break that down even and be like, okay, well, what's the bare bones minimum that you would need for 3 months? It would be your bills and like groceries and like basic life. How much of that would be taken care of with EI if you're an employee and like you qualified? And then we get down to the nitty gritty. But the goals, that's why I always say, like, I'll set the goals for you, but like, everybody can customize it within what they can do. What's your replaceable income? Try to get your bills to align with that. And then so you can like not fear as much. And then the second thing would be just to have as much in emergencies as you could, so that you could withstand a 3 month period of unemployment. And that will make you less afraid in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. I think that's such valuable. I know I can think of like a handful of specific people I know are listening to this podcast right now, and I'm sure there's many more for whom that's just such valuable advice, because I think that yeah, like money, our jobs, all of these things are just so tied and are only feeling like they're more tied, right? And for those who feel there's like a misalignment with their values or with who they want to be, it can be really hard, but it can also, and it can feel really scary, but you can't pay rent with values, right?
No.
So you got to pay it somehow, and sometimes that gets really very real very quickly, right?
Yeah. And one thing that I've seen too, like just watching people's lives play out as like just like a hopeful reminder, I think I would
Yeah.
offer. So I've seen people get laid off, not be able to replace their job, have to go back to school, dip into their RRSP to do so, all of it, the whole crisis. And then like 5 years later, it's like everything's okay again. And like same with like marriage breakdowns. I've seen them be awful for everybody involved, and like uprooting kids and moving away and like renting, you lost a house, now that like all this, like all the things that made you are gone and stripped, and financially you're starting over again in your 40s. And then like 5 years later, it's like that person's okay.
Yeah.
So my own job has made me slightly, I say slightly because I'm still a human being, less afraid of the worst case scenarios playing out, because I have this real live show playing out in front of me where over time the crisis is okay again. And so I have that like long-term lens that I think when we're in those crisis moments, we can't see it. And so there's like I don't know. I think that is helpful, because it's like time can make any shitty situation feel like iron itself out. Do you know what I mean? So
yes.
And I've also seen people like go back and retrain and like not earn anything for 2 years and like empty their RSPs, and like now they have a whole new career and a whole new life, and it's like everything worked out. And it's not that it worked out as in like everything's peachy keen and perfect. It's just that their expectations changed, things pivoted, things worked out, and I don't know, it's funny. It's funny. I've seen thousands of people, and I don't think there's ever one person. There's one person that got caught in a Ponzi scheme. Okay, so I'll tell you that in a second. But other than that had like their life blow up in a crisis that didn't, over the long run, end up finding a way through.
Yeah.
You know?
It's such what an incredible thing to be able to witness, to just remind yourself that of the like fluidity of money. And I think that's,
And life.
And everything, right? And I mean, you're certainly speaking to my experiences, and I think folks who listen to this know, like, I lost my job quite suddenly a couple of years ago, and it was a shock, and it was a dark moment, and it was like that, oh shit, who am I? Like all the things.
Yeah.
And I look back on that moment as like the greatest thing that could have happened to me in hindsight. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't easy.
It's never pretty.
But here I am on the other side, in a whole place I never would have been had I not gone through that. And as a person, a version of myself that I probably wouldn't have become had I not gone through that. And it was only through time, but it really does do things. Okay, I'm absolutely coming back to the Ponzi scheme. But before I do, like, I would just love to like follow through on that thought of like, now having seen this, and you talked a little bit about this earlier, but having witnessed all those stories, how does that change you when you think about your own life?
I'm a happier person who's less anxious. And it's because I know this. I've articulated this multiple times before after being able to see it.
Yeah.
Number one of the biggest sources of anxiety for people is social media. They see their peers on vacation in Mexico with their family, doing a home reno, and they think, you're like me, but I can't afford those things. So what the hell is wrong with me? Why am I so behind?
Yeah.
And I see those things too, but I also see how it's happening. So I also see, oh, that person inherited like $300,000. Well, I didn't, so I can't compare myself. That person funded that entire thing on a line of credit, and they are like fighting every day because of it. So that's how that's happening. Yeah. And I don't compare myself to my peers in the same way, because I often know exactly how things are going down on the whole. And I don't necessarily, I can't compare myself because we're in different financial situations. Like I didn't grow up. Yeah. I didn't have a huge, massive generational wealth transfer that happened to me to like buy a house when I was 20. So
Right.
how can I compare myself to someone who did? I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
And so like it helps me in that way because I really understand how it's going down instead of that, like, how are they doing it conversation that I know happens at the kitchen table, like constantly. So in that way, it's really helped just make me less of a comparison person, which I think robs us all of our current joy of what we do have. We're
Absolutely.
worrying about what we don't have. Number two, it's given me that like long lens. Things will work out if the worst happens. Like people figure it out. Time heals. People figure it out. And sometimes the worst case scenario can often be the greatest blessing in disguise, but you need like time to see that. You will never see it in the moment. It will be horrible. So it's made me less afraid of life happening to me and like the lemons that get thrown at all of us. And I think finally it's made me like enjoy life more in the present because I've seen what like I was speaking to earlier, just the time is now.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what's going to happen. And I have seen people, yeah, as I said, like save up their whole life and then get sick and, or like a critical illness, they can't travel, or like they have to become a caregiver and they can't leave. You just do your thing, like just live it. Like within whatever, don't be reckless, obviously. And you have to save stuff too and all that stuff because you don't want to be like the grasshopper who sang all summer. At the same time, it's just like, it's lightened me. My job has given me such a gift of, it's like free therapy.
It sounds like it. Like genuinely, it's incredible to see that window behind the scenes and just the, in finances in the future, it can all feel so heavy. And I feel it's only feeling heavier as the certainty disappears. But, to hear that is very hopeful. And your point around self-trust and just trusting yourself that you'll get through it. You'll figure it out. Like, these things
Trusting
happen.
yourself. Absolutely. Trusting yourself and stop comparing to others. I think this is one of the biggest changes from millennials and on that Gen X and baby boomers didn't have to deal with because they didn't have social media so young when we were all like establishing our lives, and it impacts them too, but not in those not in those years where we're establishing like who we are and what we're doing and all that kind of stuff. I just think do you remember, like, I remember when we bought, my parents bought a house in the suburbs for like $89,000 in 1988. And it had like some weird tiles, some ugly rug, weird stuff. We lived with the ugly rug and the weird tiles. At no point, like, we fixed it over time, which was so normal back then. My mom didn't worry about having people over and was like, don't worry, we're going to renovate. Like, nobody asked. Nobody gave a shit.
Nobody cared. Yeah.
Nobody gave a shit. Like, I guess some weird tiles, whatever. Like, okay, yeah, it is some weird tiles. That's literally it. And like, I don't understand when actually I do. I blame trading, or that TLC, that show where you
Trading Spaces
made home renovations seem like everyone should just do them. That whole craze. I really feel like now people buy a house and they build in the line of credit for the renovations to make it their own. And this is something that, like, what? When did we lose the plot? Like, what, like, why is it not okay to have a weird rug?
Right.
Like, honestly, why not? And I just had a client who bought a house. They've been saving for years, 41, been saving for years. It finally happened. And she had like a welcome party or whatever. And someone was like, so when are you going to renovate the basement? Because it's not finished.
Yeah.
And it's like, can I swear on the show?
Yeah.
I just fucking bought this house. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Why are you putting that pressure on me?
Yeah. And why would you expect that? And why do I need to do that? And why is this?
And these are not rich people. These are not like high-end circles. This is like a middle-class professional worker, like, to save their whole life, like, finally was able to do it. And like, that's the
massive accomplishment.
question.
Massive accomplishment. And then it's like, not enough.
No, and the friend didn't mean to be unkind. It was an honest, curious question because that's normal.
It's been so normalized. Like you said,
right.
It's been so normal. Well, and I mean, there's a whole other conversation there that we could get into around, like, the housing bubble and the period of cheap money. And, when you could take out these lines of credit against your house and do this big renovation. And it wasn't, I mean, I'm sure it's come back to bite pretty much everyone who did it, but like, it was normalized in this really crazy way. And then there's a whole other conversation around like the flatness of culture and design, because you go into these houses that used to have the funky tile and the interesting architecture, and then people renovate them into like gray slate and glass railings, and it's just sort of, it's these like 100-year-old beautiful houses in the city, and then you walk in and it just looks kind of like a spaceship.
Right?
Anyway, no shade to anyone who did a very modern, like, you do you. Just the point being, like, don't go into crazy debt to, live without funky tiles if that's not something that you need to be doing.
Yeah, permission to own the funky tiles and the weird rug. Like, permission granted. We don't need to be perfect. And being aware as well as when you ask someone that too. Like,
Yeah.
you know what else is a really triggering question I've noticed for people? And I like to put those triggering questions out there. I asked you one right off the top as well. And I did it, even though I know that this is something that really can be like an accidental, harmful question. What are your plans for the summer? Are you going anywhere?
Right.
What I've just done is make you feel like you should be. So let's say that you're trying to tone it in and you're just going to do some like day trips with your fam. And that's totally awesome and very much the norm of how I grew up anyways, like free day trips to the, you do stuff. I've just put you in a spot where you think that, I wish I had something to say there, which you did have something to say, which is great. But like that question,
Yeah.
are you going somewhere? Same with March break. Are you going somewhere?
Yeah.
It's so telling what we think is normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof, that's a part two podcast conversation.
Yeah, right. There it is.
It's coming. It's coming. Tune back in a couple months. We'll have more to say. Okay, before we run out of time, tell me about this Ponzi scheme.
Oh my gosh. So obviously can't tell you who this was, obviously anything like that, but they'll tell you the situation high level.
Yes.
A real person in my real life came to me for financial advice after they had lost $1 million to a real Ponzi scheme that played out. It was that they had invested with this person who was not a person that was trustworthy for years before it came out. So they had been getting dividends for 2 or 3 statements, everything. They did all their due diligence. It wasn't like a press here scam. It wasn't that. It was a real Ponzi scheme. And then the whole thing came crashing down after, I think it was almost 3 years, and everything fell apart. And obviously they were left with nothing, their entire retirement, everything gone. So that is a wild thing that's happened. That is the only time that I've been like, time will not replace this. But you know what I will say? I met that person 10 years ago, and that person is now working well into what was supposed to be their retirement, obviously, because they had to start again. And they're not unhappy. So I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
Life did not work out the way that it was supposed to. There's obviously years of trauma and regret and how could I let this happen and self-blame that are now smoothing the edges. But they're not an unhappy person. They're not an unhappy couple. The couple made it. They made it through. Yeah. Right. And like they downsized. They made it. They just made it work.
Figured it out.
They figured it out. So like they will never get close to the trajectory of where it was supposed to be. But they have found peace. Maybe that's the word that I would use, is that they've made peace with it. Mm-hmm. And again, that's just time. Like it's just time. But like that was probably the most wild thing that I've ever had somebody go through.
Wow. That's a wild thing to go through. I mean, kudos for them though to find peace. I mean, I think that is a testament to life is what you make of it. And it's going to be, there's always going to be lots of things that turn out differently than what you expected. And that doesn't make the trauma of the experience okay or light or anything like that. There's almost always a path you can find to navigate through it. But wow. Okay. That's good. Everybody's got problems. You never know what people are dealing with, right?
And you never know. So many people in their life do not know that. And you never know.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting that you never know exactly. I always say to anyone that's going through something, actually, like, this is not a shameless book plug, though it is. I read a book called No Regret Decisions. And that's because one of the things that I've also seen playing out over this, 20 years is bad things happen. Things happen to people. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who's still anxious and blaming themselves and who's made peace? And what was the difference between they've all had bad things happen to them and like, what's the difference? And the ones who can find peace the fastest and get to a place of like peace or like happiness, I guess I would say, are those that don't have as many regrets, who don't keep blaming themselves.
Yeah,
who don't dwell and blame themselves with it. Exactly. And so I'm always like, I said it, I always say, like, there are often great decisions that have bad outcomes. Very possible. Like everyone who had a variable mortgage that signed on in 2020, 2021, and then everything went up. That doesn't mean that you're stupid. That doesn't mean you're bad with money. You made a great decision at the time. They were who knew that it was going to get so wild so fast? Right? And like, don't let that rob you of your confidence. Because when you start blaming yourself for bad financial stuff, unless you like gambled your house, that's when you start believing that you're bad with money. And when you start believing that you're bad with money, you start believing that you're bad at life, because money is how we pay for our life. So you got to watch that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Great advice. Okay, my last question before we wrap this up, and this has been just such a fantastic conversation. I ask everyone this. We are often asked, what would be a piece of advice you'd give your younger self? But in this case, since we're looking at our futures, the question is, what is a piece of advice you would give your future self to live?
It's a great question. I would say, Shannon, make sure you're still making every moment count. That's what I would say. There you go.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been incredible. And I think you've left our listeners with so much to listen, to think about, and also just so much to feel good about. It's really empowering to hear someone like you just, be so transparent and authentic about life and what it really means. And that, it means value your money, but value your time too. So that's what I'm going to take away from this. So thank you so much. And I can't wait for our next conversation.
Oh, so great. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's our show. Thank you, Shannon, for being such an amazing guest and for such an amazing conversation. I am totally serious about having her back on soon. We just have so much more we could be talking about. Thank you again to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. Visit www.habitcoffeeclub.com and use promo code midpoint at checkout for 20% off your first purchase. That's our show for today. We'll see you guys next week.